for all of us. It's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.
Today on the show, I've got Terry Haley. He's the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Product for Pampered Chef. Pampered Chef was founded in 1980 by Doris Christopher and is now part of the Berkshire Hathaway family of businesses. And they sell high-quality kitchen tools, and they do that through a number of direct sales consultants. Their distribution is primarily through those in-home cooking demonstrations or virtual demonstrations that we'll talk about. Over 1 million are held in the United States each year, and they have somewhere around 500 offerings, with 90% of those products being exclusive to Pampered Chef. So on the show today, Terry and I talk about his path to marketing, not an easy or expected place for him to go. We talk about his career early on at places like Miller Brewing Company, with brands like Henry Weinhard's, Miller Genuine Draft, and many others. His switch to food and restaurants at Payway, which was a part of P.F. Chang's, and much, much more. We'll talk about also their direct sales model at Pampered Chef and how that changes the calculus of marketing. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with my friend, Terry Haley. So Terry, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Terry Haley, CMO at Pampered Chef.
Terry, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Al. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to talk to you. It's been a while. And
Too long.
I know. One of these things I found out about you, though, is I should apparently never challenge you to a middle distance race or a cook-off. So what's that about?
Oh, well, you may not have wanted to challenge me about 20 some years ago. I was a runner, a track athlete all the way through college. And then cooking is another thing that's just become an important part of my life. So the running is certainly not where it used to be with age. And I definitely don't race anymore because it makes me realize my age. But I guess athletics in general now and cooking are kind of my two big hobbies outside of family and work. And I think they're my therapy too. You know, they both kind of give me some quick wins throughout the week, you know, get a workout in or get a game of basketball going. And I feel like I accomplished something regardless of the day. And then, you know, cooking, which definitely has played itself out in this current role of just a passion of mine linking to what I get to get up and do at work every day. But I really enjoy it. My wife is by far the better of the two of us, but I'm kind of the weekend warrior cook. It's just, you know, getting in the kitchen for kind of a big cook or a big, in the summer, some serious grilling time. It just kind of helps me, you know, get my head right. And then also it's fun to put a good meal on the table for whoever's enjoying it. It's kind of another win for the day. So, you know, little wins go a long way.
Yeah. No, I've actually, we just did a kitchen renovation in my house and just finished in the last week or two.
Nice.
And I was able to make dinner last night, or not last night, the night before, Sunday night, I guess, for my family as well. Nothing too fancy. I've got this like emerald pasta dish that everyone loves.
Love it.
Yeah.
Just shoot me the recipe.
I will.
I love the carb centric meals. I'm a big fan of those.
It's super easy too. It's only about 2-ish pots, and then you're good to go. So,
well, after this, we'll talk about Pampered Chef together, and
I love it.
Get you a side hustle.
Well, I know. Speaking of cooking, so you are the CMO of Pampered Chef. Tell us a little bit of like your journey. Like, where'd you get started, and how'd you end up at Pampered Chef?
Well, you know, Alan, it's kind of an interesting journey for me. I actually all the way through college and marketing and business wasn't really where I was focusing. I was actually a political science student with also double majored in PR, but I had all the aspirations to go out to your neck of the woods in DC and work on the Hill. But I got injured one season running, so I had to redshirt and my scholarship rolled over, so I went straight into graduate school. And it was the summer between my 2 years of graduate school. I had to go make some money to pay the bills. The scholarship was gone. And it's kind of funny. It's fortuitous in that I was interviewing my internships, and I was actually in a final interview for a financial firm in Milwaukee, and it was going to be the international desk. So it was the swing shift. So I was really excited at age of 20, 21 to be spending all my nights working late into the morning. And then to date myself, I was in the library and I was on Job Track, if you remember, actually having to go to the library to access a computer. And I'm sure Job Track is long gone by now, but I was researching a job, and there is a job at AC Nielsen, if you know the, I'm sure you know the AC Nielsen analytics company. And so I took an interview, and it turned out it was an on-site gig at Miller Brewing Company, being a retail and consumer panel analyst. And how close it was for me not to go into marketing and into finance is, so I took the interview, and the gentleman, Dan Zillis, great guy, he offered me the role right away. And I said, well, Dan, I have this other job that I want to just follow through to the end, and then I'll make a decision. He said that was fine. And then it must have been 30 minutes later, he called me, and I thought he was going to retract. So I just took the job. I didn't even, I'm like, he's like, I was just trying to get your email address so I could send you the information, but that's great. Join up. So, but that was the start actually, because I just getting to service category management team and brand team. And through that exposure, I just fell in love with it. And so that kind of led to, I guess, fortuitous moment part number 2, which I was working towards the end of the internship, and now graduate school was coming to a close. So I was looking for the full-time next moment. And actually, no, I'd stopped being an intern. I think I was working full-time there at Nielsen while I finished grad school. But long story, I decided I wanted to get in to brand management and marketing. So I had some my clients, particularly a guy named Tim McDougall, was running the Miller Lite brand. And then a gentleman in the insights group who's leading that referred me down to HR to talk about a brand role. And so I went in there, and I don't think we got more than a couple minutes in. And he told me I went to the wrong graduate school because they didn't recruit there. And so I was like, wait, my graduate school's 3 miles away. That's pretty convenient. Be a good. Right. And he's just like, no, we recruit there, and that's where we draw our candidates. And so I went back to Tim, and I conveyed my disappointment, but turned it. I talked to him, and I said, hey, I still really want to do this. I'm passionate about it. And so how about I'll stay at AC Nielsen, because I loved it. I loved the team. I loved the job. I loved the work we were doing. And I was learning a great deal. And I said, but while I'm doing that, would you make sure I stay on, as you stay as my client? And would you teach me? And then bring me into other meetings just so I can start soaking in a broader understanding. And when the opportunity arises, I'd love another shot at it. And he agreed. But he told me, he's like, yeah, it'll probably be a couple of years. And it was like 8 months later. There was a job for this brand in the Northwest called Henry Weinhard's that had really struggled due to, had been sold to Miller Brewing Company. Its brewery in the Northwest had closed down. So and authenticity of place is big in craft brewing, and particularly up there, which was it was the mecca of craft brewing at the time. And so it had gone through pretty precipitous decline. So I don't think anyone was lining up. But it was my way in, and it was the great. In the fortuitous side of it, it was just a tremendous opportunity. I had an amazing boss, a gentleman named Jake Valletta, who still I hold dear to my heart today, and still consider an advisor. And then it was just one of those jobs where it was a small business that had been declining, and there wasn't a lot of focus on it. So I got to, instead of getting a associate role on a brand where you're just doing a small piece, I got to essentially manage the entirety of the business. And we managed as a team to do some pretty good things with that business. And that kind of set the case off in Miller as I started kind of getting assignments of brands that, either had fewer resources or were kind of fixer challenges and progressed through Miller Brewing. And it was just the perfect start to my career because it just built that strong kind of CPG branding with tremendous teachers, tremendous teammates. And so I was there for about 6 or 7 years, I think. And then I went into the restaurant business industry for about, it was 12 years-ish. And then after that, I moved on to the latest role, which is Pampered Chef. And that's been about 3.5 years and total different industry, different product, but it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah. Well, still connected to food.
Yeah. Food and alcohol tend to just are the golden thread of my career so far, I guess.
Well, I love it. And I love how you basically work the system to find your way into Miller.
I guess it was more tenacity. Well, a little luck and some tenacity, definitely. But, it also was just relationships. And I think, if there's one thing I've learned throughout it, the relationships that you build and the mentors that you establish, the trust you create goes a long way.
Well, I love it. It seems like you've worked the system, one, to get into Miller through AC Nielsen, kind of a backdoor approach there. And then to your point around Henry Weinhard's, no one's was volunteering for that role. And it seemed like a pretty challenging role, but it gave you a lot of breadth. You got to see the whole picture, so to speak. Have you been, I don't know, taking on those challenging roles every time? I mean, they're a great learning opportunity if you have.
Well, I mean, at first, I don't know if I worked the system versus had some luck and some tenacity, I guess, to go with it. But I think the bigger thing was just, the importance of relationships.
Yeah.
If I've learned one thing, it's the mentors that you establish, the trust you create, the people you surround yourself with certainly goes a long way. And and those people have carried with me the entire time. Now on the Henry side, and I think every role is a challenge. I think it's just what is the challenge that you have to solve. I don't know if I've had an easy one yet, but I guess that's what makes it fun. But I think, I think Henry's, and then a lot of the roles after were particularly at Miller, but then even when I went into some of the roles, initial role in restaurants, there's a lot of building in restaurants. My first role, Paywave, there really wasn't a marketing as well of an established marketing discipline. And so getting to build that from the ground up was certainly both a challenge and at the same time, a lot of opportunity to kind of build something, what you learn, but also the vision you want to lay out and really you have nowhere to go but up in some ways. But I thought it was a lot of those types of roles have, I guess, gravitated towards me more than maybe I gravitated there, but just taking the opportunity as it comes is, again, I think some of it's luck and some of it's skill, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've ended up, we talked about food and alcohol, like you've worked across a number of different business models too, like beer, restaurants, now direct selling, organization. How do you bridge across all those different types of models with marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Alan, the foundations stay the same in a lot of ways, regardless of the challenge, right? Relentless focus on the consumer, their needs, delivering a product that solves a problem, and then being able to position that product in their minds as something that's relevant that they're going to want to essentially gravitate to and build a relationship with is kind of a constant, right? But the different models, I think actually it's just going in eyes wide open and really appreciating the nuances of the model. I think if one thing I've learned across the various elements was the importance of not rushing in with what you believe to be true necessarily about how things are going to work, but rather taking the time to really learn how the entire machine works, and how you go to market, because they each of these industries in general have very different routes. And I thought, for example, at restaurants, I remember the 2 of the 3 roles I spent the first month in the restaurant itself doing all the jobs, because that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of the actual experience with the customer itself. But But at the same point, understanding as you're building your marketing activation, be it culinary innovation or even down to just a simple promotion, to understand the impact it has on the restaurant itself and the operators of the restaurant and the staff, because you can easily come up with what you think is a great idea that's actually going to gum up the works and create a bad experience, both for your teammates as well as for the customer. I remember at Poli in particular, we had just built our own online ordering platform.
Mm-hmm.
And, we'd started really looking to grow our off-premise business. And so we'd started running, particularly on days where we knew there would be big to-go business, and this is not like we thought of this on our own. But we finally unearthed the capability of providing a promotional code, distributing it, and we'd see massive lifts in traffic. And I remember one of our regional vice presidents, who was based in Phoenix with us, he came into my office and said, "You have no idea what this is doing to my operation in terms of the amount of traffic that was hitting and the experience that it was creating." And so I remember talking to him, I said, "That's a great point. I don't. And so I'll strike a deal that every one of these promotions we do, particularly the larger ones, every one of the marketing team is going to work a register, either at lunch or dinner on the first day of the promotion, just so we can feel it."
Yeah. And
then I could have a conversation with them about, okay, now I understand what you're talking about. Let's talk this through. And I think, you get into Pampered Chef, and this is the most unique model or industry I've ever worked with, being in direct selling and marketing through tens of thousands of consultants in the North America and the EU, and really understanding how it works. And I realized really quick that, again, where the fundamentals, where a lot of them are the same, my predisposition on what the go-to-market approach would be, it's like, I got to throw out 70% of the playbook here and start rebuilding it, because it's a really different. But I think the benefit of jumping industries is, or moving across industries, is the amount of learning you get, because not only are you within the marketing discipline itself, are you having to stretch yourself and learn different ways ultimately to reach your end user in an effective manner, but you also, depending on the role, you touch so many different aspects of the business. So I found that it's really helped me become just more well-rounded as a business person and a teammate in general.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're also you're coming at this new model or industry as with fresh eyes as well, with learning and developing yourself, but also taking a fresh approach potentially for that industry, or at least with fresh eyes.
Yeah, no, I've heard some of, even some of that when we were going through the hiring process for Pampered Chef, that was a desire. But I think ultimately, and wasn't one of my best traits earlier on in my career, but got to go in with a pretty heavy dose of humility. And so the advantage, or I guess one of the benefits, I could bring to Pampered Chef are fresh eyes. But I'm also very lucky to have great partners and colleagues that are probably, one, patient with me and open, but two, it's really important that I'm also malleable myself, and willing and really open to learning from them, because they know what I don't. And so that partnership in kind of two-way allows us to hopefully untap the value of the collective versus the individual.
I love that. Well, we've been talking around Pampered Chef. Let's talk about Pampered Chef. Tell me a little bit more about the business, like the scope of it. I know it's part of the Berkshire Group. So tell me a little bit more about it, though.
Yeah. So Pampered Chef's an over 40-year-old company, and it was founded by an amazing woman named Doris Christopher out of her kitchen, and she was looking to make some income within kind of aligned with her passion, but also within the confines of her life and how busy it was, and tremendous business mind, just tremendous person. And she built Pampered Chef from the ground up, but ultimately, so she built this amazing company that, delivers not just top end kitchen tools, and that really help, simplify the mealtime journey for people who really want to, they're caregivers. They want to be in the kitchen. They want to provide meal on the table for their families. But, particularly modern times, the modern caregiver is a lot different than decades ago, where you're they're superheroes in my mind in terms of try to do that role and you'd say your job's the easiest job in the world, but they're shuffling everything, whether it's a job as well, a career themselves. As a parent myself, the ungodly amount of soccer and dance practices and things that you're trying to schedule, just getting dinner on the table's a feat. And Doris believed more than just mealtime as sustenance, but as kind of a key part of the fabric of the family and in kind of your close community. And how mealtime, gathering around the table, be it real or metaphorically, how important that is, where the family reconnects and it's kind of that haven and where most of those important discussions, memories are discussed, created, even just the thought of what it does for mental health of the family. It's just such an important piece. And that resonated with me when I was looking at it, because we always had dinner time as a family at 6:30 every day. And my wife and I, now it's probably more 7:30, but we're really committed to doing that as well. And so the brand, in addition to just selling the tools for mealtime, we try to cultivate mealtime as an end. And we do that through just these tremendous consultants that we have that are really a real competitive advantage in my mind, because they not only are we selling kitchen tools, but they're demonstrating the usage, but they're also providing the kitchen hacks, the tools outside of the product to really help people build confidence in the kitchen and be able to simplify that mealtime journey in order to reach the end destination, which is that time with your family. And so my role at Pampered Chef is, as CMO, is both to lead the marketing function as well as the product function, from product management to ultimate product innovation and development. And so it's a really fun role in that capacity of getting to oversee both of those pieces of the business and build that connection. And then, obviously work with what I believe is just a great team to bring it to our consultants and help them succeed. And I think that's the other really great part of Pampered Chef, is really our top consumer, which is our consultants. And, while the product and the mealtime, we're enriching lives for families, hopefully we're also enriching the lives of consultants. And I'll tell you, Alan, it's one of the more fulfilling parts of the role is getting to meet what are just remarkable people and the stories of what they've drawn from their experience with Pampered Chef and with their fellow consultants and Pampered Chef family. It can be extraordinarily moving. I can't tell you how many times I've choked up to testimonials. It's a given. They show a testimonial and the tears start. But at the same point, it's really rewarding, and it gives you that extra reason to get up in the morning and get after it.
Yeah. Well, it is quite a unique channel and go-to-market channel and sales channel. How do you think about maximizing that channel, so to speak? Their stories are powerful, like you said, but they're also your pro users as well as sales force, if you will.
Well, and there are marketers.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that is one of the hardest transitions as a marketer is, when you're in most other industries, you're going direct to your consumer with your messaging. You've got your ad budget, you've got your various elements, you're optimizing it, you're targeting, and you have a lot more control of the narrative directly to the customer. And so, but in this model, your advertising by and large and your communications channel by and large are your consultants. And so you're marketing through people versus necessarily through paid. So one of the great parts of it is, if you think about it, you've got about tens of thousands of influencers out there that aren't even, it's a next level influencer, because it's not just a partnership you created. These are just passionate lovers of the brand and the community. And so that's amazing. And the benefit of it, or I think when it really works, is it's not your consultants just forwarding on the assets and content you create. It's when they're creating, it's their own authentic story and their authentic testimonial, and the way they share things is what really pulls consumers in. And so the challenge that comes with it is, how do you steer that product group
Right.
So you have consistency and impact while not diluting the authenticity of the individuals that are selling and marketing your brand. And so it's a lot more of steering and influencing and driving a direction, getting buy-in and a belief, and in training and educating. But ultimately, it's their call, and so it's really important that you're building that relationship and you're listening to your consultants and you're partnering with your consultants versus just telling your consultants.
Right.
And I think when I interviewed for the role, I think one of the bigger, I guess, selling points or draws to me was I'd had time in franchising in restaurants.
Yeah.
And where it's different, it's somewhat similar in that you have people who've bought into your business, right? In franchising, they're not employees, they're partners. And so you got to think of them that way because you have to value that relationship with your franchisee or with your consultant, and that they're choosing to invest in the brand and that you're propagating. And so I think it's a challenge, but it's a fun one in that regard. But it requires different muscles. And as I said earlier, it requires a whole lot of humility because, as marketers, you want to control the story. You want to control the narrative. This is my baby. And you have to relinquish some of that. Not obviously to a point where you feel it's hurting the brand or creating diffuse messaging or anything to that extent. But there is a trust relationship. And you have to really lead through influence a lot more than perhaps you do in other areas because you don't control everything. And so definitely requires some different tools in the toolkit.
Nice. Well, I mean, how we've just gone through, and I guess we're still going through, but coming out the other end of a pandemic. And I imagine there was a big push to digital in some form or fashion during that time. So how have you kind of navigated that shift, if you will, as a company and as a sales force?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. We went 100% digital overnight, and I think navigating it. I think one, we were fortunate to have people well before me at Pampered Chef, and people still there, but on the team that had the foresight to get us in there. And so I think we were 40-50% digital, virtual in terms of the parties that we were running. And so Pampered Chef is a party model. So you have a host and they invite their friends, and you that's essentially the store coming to life, and then they shop the store. But you have to have parties and you have to have a place to have the party. So the virtual channel was one that was growing for us already, but certainly it was turbocharged with the pandemic. And so, but I think that changed for us. One, it was actually the environment lent itself very well for the change because that time was actually an advantage for us because of our model. I think, you had one, people couldn't go out shopping.
Right. That's true.
Everyone was cooking from home.
Yes.
I mean, you saw the sour bread dough making that. I think there's probably never been as much sour bread made in a 2-year period outside of San Francisco. Right. And so you had people inherently wanting to be at home, and we could service that. And so that was there was some serious rocket fuel for the business when it happened. And so that eased the transition. But I think we certainly had to quickly and continuously now bone up our digital and virtual experiences to keep up with that transition. So now that we've come out of the pandemic, we've begun to go back to some live engagements, but the business is still, and I believe will largely remain predominantly virtual. And so the challenge becomes, how do you create an experience virtually that brings some of the benefits of the live demonstration, the live interaction and engagement with the customer? And how do you provide essentially a return on engagement to the customer for giving you their time in the party?
Right.
And there's a whole different list of skills for your consultants that have to be mastered. They have to, it's not just running a party on virtual, but it's creating an experience on virtual, your own video content, being able to engage in these channels. How do you find and convert leads when you're not face to face? And so there definitely has been a lot of work that had been done on that. And so, we've done a lot of things beyond, over the last few years to really set ourselves up for future success. I think one of the biggest things the company did, and it was run by a guy named Shiv Dutt, who's extraordinarily smart man. We created our own platform called Table, and it's our own virtual online platform. So, initial virtual was entirely done through social networks.
Right.
You give up a lot of control in terms of even the experience you can create has to adhere to, obviously, the rules of engagement in that particular network. And we wanted to create something that really would allow that brought some of the benefits, some of the mechanics of those networks, so that consultants could easily transition over, but allow a lot more control in terms of the experience we create, both our ability to support our consultants through creating virtual outlines and content and things that they could much more easily share, but also enable them to create and scale content themselves, so that the effort that they're having to put into each individual party is more focused on the engagement within the party versus just running it itself.
Interesting.
And so that's been a really good move for the company. But we continuously have to look at, and it's a concerted effort for us, is creating the experience that's worthwhile for the customer, and that essentially it's not just a push experience, but there is a level of pull. Because ultimately you want someone attending one of these parties, and it's not just I bought a product, but I learned something. I got value. I'm better in the kitchen for it being attended. And you just have to. It's a little more difficult to do at scale in a virtual environment, and to be able to essentially build up the skill set of particularly new consultants coming into the business, to be able to quickly do that. And so that's obviously a key point of emphasis. It's been one for us for the last couple of years and continues to be one.
Got it. Well, and as we come out of the pandemic, it feels like, one, all these tools that you've built during will obviously make you stronger and support a better ecosystem of experience in virtual. Are you also trying to get back to the physical parties themselves and in homes and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's organically happening to some extent. You have a lot of consultants who just love the live. The live experience isn't always just the customer. I think a lot of our consultants find a lot of joy in it as well.
Yeah.
So it's organically started growing. I think ultimately, there's a degree of just meeting consumers where they are, right? So I think all in one or the other is probably not necessarily the best solution, because to your point, you do have people now who they're virtual out. They've done so many virtual experiences over the last 3 years. There's just virtue in getting in a room with people, and it's fun. And so I think it's good to build that skill set. And for some consultants, though, that's now a new skill that we would have to build up, because a lot of the consultants who joined anyone who's joined over the last couple of years has only known virtual. So now it's almost the complete inverse to what it was, right? We had to teach them. So now it's like you got to build the consultant confidence of what it's to go into someone's home and actually do a cooking show and demonstrate in that environment. So, but I think a balance is good. I think even the opportunity even to blend the two, and through some sort of hybrid experience where you have the live, but you can then increase the reach of a given party through digital, is an interesting proposition as well. But I think you're remiss to not adjust to and ultimately provide the offerings so that you're meeting the consumer for what they're looking for, not just for what you want them to experience, but also thinking about how do they want to experience your brand and being accessible in that capacity.
Well, more things to come, I'm sure. It sounds like a fascinating business, and one that you've yet again mastered. The
mastery is not even close. I tell people all the time, like, I still feel we're a little over almost 3.5 years in, and I would say I'm still on a learning curve, which I like, actually. Why wouldn't you want it that way?
Right.
It makes it so much more stimulating that you're always growing as a person, as a marketer within whatever role you take. And anyone who I onboard, I just tell them, check what you know at the door and immerse. Your 90 days is you really got to give yourself up to understanding the nuances of this model, because it is heavily nuanced, and you won't learn it in 90 days, but you got to get there, and then you got to keep delving in. because it's a fun model, but it's one that, it's definitely not like there's a book for dummies out there that you get to read and, figure out. You kind of got to jump in, and you just got to really, the great thing is, this company, it's just fascinating at Pampered Chef that there's people that have been there for decades, and and those are the people who just, it's really worth tapping into, as well as the consultants that have been there for a long time, because you got to be willing to challenge and look at it differently. But there's so much knowledge there that you'd be, I think, foolish not to tap into it and to let yourself be malleable to your approach.
Love it. Well, one of the things we like to do on this show is also get to know you a little bit better. And my favorite question to ask everyone that comes on is, has there been an experience of your past that defines or makes up who you are today?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. I mean, oh, there's so many. One that comes to mind for me it is a professional experience. Was when I was at Miller, and I was running the Miller Genuine Draft franchise, and we were doing a full relaunch of the brand. So it was a really challenging and fun assignment.
Yeah.
But as a part of it, we partnered with this new agency we've been referred from the top. And I remember their pitch, their essential pitch was, or their approach was, finding partnerships in the entertainment circle that match the equities and purpose of your brand and forging a relationship. And it's almost influencer-esque before Instagram and social and kind of the huge growth of kind of influencer marketing. And I bought what they were selling pretty heavily. And it was funny because I remember a mentor of mine said, he said, watch out for this one a little bit. And I said, why do I watch out? He said, well, understand where the motivation is. It probably ties more to the kind of monetizing the relationship long term versus necessarily just the brand itself. And I was like, thank you, but I'm going to go with this thing.
Right.
And so we partnered with this, I guess, celebrity or influencer, and we'd done a ton of work on it, cross-functional team. I mean, literally tens, 20s of people worked on it, but it kind of paid out like he had told me it was. And it just ultimately wasn't working. And so I remember we had this, so I was going to pull the plug. I finally reassessed and was like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on what we're doing here. And so we're going to pull out. And so I scheduled the meeting, and it was in the basement conference room of Miller, which was like the catacombs of Miller. And so that was depressing. Even the setting was depressing. Right. But we pulled in like 20 to 30 people. And these were people I had a ton of respect for, worked their rear ends off on it. And, they're all levels, people senior to me. And I think I was like 27, 28 years old. So it was pretty early in my career, and called them all in. And I said, listen, this isn't working. And I know everyone's put so much effort into it, but I think it's time to pull the plug, and here's how I think we can do it. And I'd love some ideas, but I just remember after the meeting just feeling terrible.
That's the worst kind of meeting.
Just brutal. And I knew also that some people had questioned it as well. So it was a little bit of humble pie for me.
Yeah.
And so I remember going back up to my office and just kind of sulking in the office. And this one of my colleagues came up, and I think she was a director of, like, in the finance group, she was director of marketing, contracts, and relationships and other elements. Very, very tough woman. She had to be. I mean, that's why she was great in her role. She of course probably had it the worst, because I think it was one of the hardest and painful contracts she'd ever had to negotiate. It was not. I remember knowing it was not fun for her.
Yeah. And
so she knocked on the door, and I just looked up at her, and she said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, I just want to let you know I'm proud of you." And I said, "What?" And she just said, I've known a lot of people senior to you, or a lot more tenure, that have been more willing to spend $10 million more to not have had the meeting you just had. And so she said, good for you for kind of owning it. And I think the learning, and it's not a new learning, right? That accountability and adversity are often where you build the most credibility.
Right.
But for me, it was the actual experience of going through it and then having, I guess, that point of validation. It just reaffirmed to me the importance of, you don't really become a leader through the wins you get or your team gets. It is those moments of how you deal with the adversity you face, the bad decisions you make, how you own them, and how you try to lead out of them. I think that ultimately builds the trust and credibility with your peers and your team. And now I'd love to say that moment in time, I got all the dose of humility and the light switched and I was there, but I still had a long way to go and learn. But I've referenced back on that moment a lot. And actually, I share that moment a lot with my teams.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. Because I think in marketing, you have to be willing to make mistakes, right? You have to push it, but you also have to own it and know when to walk away. And I think, and then what did you learn from it, right? And how do you get better? And how do you openly get your team better through, I guess, the mistake you've made? And so not only, I guess, is it an experience for me, but it's become, I guess, a teachable asset in my repertoire to kind of help other people understand the virtue of it.
No, I love that story. And I mean, what a great, to your point, a great opportunity and lesson all built into one. And yeah, it definitely sounds like it's something that you circle back to quite a bit for teaching others, reminding yourself.
Yeah, and there's a whole slew of mistakes, so I could draw from a lot of them. But that one,
that one was poignant.
That one was poignant. That one is. And if you ask people at Miller, I guarantee you they know it and they know the story. And I think I still get crap for it. If I see now that I'm back in Chicago, I still run into some old friends from there quite a bit. And I think it's not surprising when that might come up in a little good ribbing. So they definitely don't let me forget it either.
I love it. Love it. Well, what advice would you give your younger self if you're starting this journey all over again?
I think patience is something that I would have liked to have harbored more earlier in my career. I think, at the same point, one of the areas that I think helped me get to where I was is, and I think people, some people, initially, in order to take these assignments and to drive them forward, and you didn't have a lot of necessarily as much organizational focus, nor should you have. There's kind of a tenacity that you have to have.
Right.
And I guess you can be a little bit of a bull in the china shop and just kind of really drive your idea through.
Mm-hmm.
But I think later on in my career, I had to you learn as you move up that's not as, you maybe not have built all of the diplomacy and the partnership that you need to. So for me, a lot of it was, you have the big idea and you want it to come to fruition, and you didn't. I don't know if I would always let conversation breathe and let people engage, even if it's taking the initial vision I had in a different path. And so I think earlier in my career, I'd probably be more inclined to shut it down and say, no, this is where we got to go, almost at the sacrifice of buy-in and at the ability to build on the idea and make, an idea better. And, I think over time, I learned that, if you let it breathe, you get, the upside is you get more buy-in. Oftentimes your idea gets better.
Right.
Or you catch something that wasn't good and you can correct it. But oftentimes it also just comes full circle, right? It's you let it breathe and it starts steering itself back into the direction either you hoped it would or that it ultimately should have gone.
Yeah.
And so I think but at the same point, you're building a better partnership within your organization, your team. And I think it's a muscle I would have liked to have built earlier. And I'm actually keen on that today when I see my younger self within the organizations I work with. I really do try to identify and try to help people who are in similar of situations or a similar bent that I might have had at that point.
Mm.
Because I want them to not run into the doors that I ran into later as I tried to kind of pivot myself.
Yeah.
I had the same mentor that helped me with who advised me on the example I gave earlier, he and I were very similar people. And I remember, and we built a super strong relationship based on that. I think he saw a little bit of a younger version of himself in me. And he told me that one of the things he enjoyed most about working together was he literally could see me walking into the door he walked into. And he's like, he just found a lot of enjoyment of opening the door before I ran into it. And, or at least telling me the door was there. I may choose to run into it, which I did on occasion, of course, but I've kind of tried to adopt a little bit of that mindset, even if it's not someone that, maybe works directly for me, but, anyone that I see that is to learn from my own experience and journey. I find a lot of, I guess, personal fulfillment of sharing that with those stories with them so that, hopefully they don't make the same mistakes I did.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about what you're trying to learn more about right now yourself, or something you might think marketers need to be learning more about as well.
I think the great thing about marketing is you always have to be learning to stay current, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not, you're going to become a dinosaur pretty quick. But for me, so I'm always studying in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I think in a big area for me, and I think for all marketers, is really just building your broader business acumen.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I'm also, I spend a lot of my time, be it from, financial aptitude to the top operations to other elements, they all have to work synergistically to work. And so I think, and what we do as marketers affects a lot of those areas in material ways. And so boning up on that to me is, and just building the broader skill set helps you bring more value to the organization as a whole, be a better strategic thought partner across the officer suite or the director suite or wherever you are. And it also I find helps you bring ideas to fruition quickly and more effectively. But I think it's also important because I think the challenge, for a lot of continuing challenge, more and more so for marketing, is your ability to show value.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And to be able to measure it and to show the return on the investments you're asking for. And so I think those work part and parcel, right? And so I think that's a big area that I personally am trying to keep pushing myself.
It feels like, the more you understand the levers of the business, i.e. the business acumen in terms of where you can apply pressure. I don't want to make it sound easy because it's not, but the proving the value maybe become a little easier just in conversation. Would you agree with that? Or
I think it does. I think, to your point, some of it's really hard to measure.
Yes, absolutely. Some of it's not even worth measuring, potentially.
So, but I think ultimately having your point through the discussions, and even if you can't get it all the way to full attribution and full measurement of return, do you have a strong hypothesis? What are the assumptions that you're laying out? How do you measure your assumptions? How far can you get it there to build the belief? And so I don't think it's necessarily always an all or nothing. I think certain areas obviously lend themselves, obviously in performance marketing and digital. I think particularly for an old Nielsen guy who loves the kind of data geek, it's a lot of fun playing in that area because you can get to that level of fidelity. And I think that's a lot of fun, but there's some areas where you may not be able to, but get it all the way there. But you can take it as far as you can, at least. Yeah. And then try to fill the gaps with as much knowledge as you can. And to your point, have the discussion with your team about those. So it's not just to trust me, this will work, but let me really take you through the thinking and why I believe this will work and how we are at least going to be able to evaluate at the end and align on that. So when you do get there at the end, it's not you've aligned to that in advance. So you're actually measuring it together versus at the end, you're kind of throwing it out there and they haven't bought into that.
Right.
I think that's, to your point, that discussion goes a long way because then at least you're looking at it the same at the end.
Yeah.
And so you can measure it from a similar playing field or a similar viewpoint versus you wait to the end and you may have very different notions of how you should have looked at the valuation of it. And I don't think that rarely turns out to be a very effective discussion.
Right. Well, I've got two more marketing related questions for you. I'm curious if there's brands or companies or causes that you follow or you're taking notice of, or you think other people should take notice of.
Oh, that's always a tough one. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, one brand that I do look at, and it's not that far off in our space, but I look at Yeti a lot, and I'm really impressed by them. I think, I lived in Austin for a couple of years when I was at Hot Toddy, and so I was pretty close to their home base. And what I really admire about them is how consistent they stay to their core need state, the core thing, their why. But at the same point, they've managed to expand grow their tent so big. And so they've balanced, be it through color, be it through product launch, the breadth of their business, but they haven't sacrificed their core entity. So often, you're trying to find a new audience. So you start getting diffused in who you are, and you say, well, we could just go this far.
Right.
And it starts watering it down. And I think they've stayed tremendously consistent. And so they managed to do both really well. Another one I've been actually really enjoying is, I don't know, have you ever tried Athletic Brewing, Athletic non-alcoholic beer?
No, I haven't.
Oh, man. You'd ask me at Miller when it was like Sharps and Coors and
O'Doul's, yeah.
Oh, they're just god awful. There's obviously a big move towards, people more and more are balancing, either not drinking or they balance an adult beverage, but sometimes you just don't want the alcohol. Yeah. And so they've built such a tremendous non-alcoholic beer. I mean, it's products off the charts. And I think the brand they've built and where I've seen them show up, and I just think they've really been smart about how they're growing it. And as you'd asked me 5 years ago, would a non-alcoholic beer be someone I'd be looking at? And I would have told you you're crazy. But now it's a tremendous, but it starts just a tremendous product. It's a product I didn't think you could get a non-alcoholic beer too, and they've done a really good job in that capacity. But then I also think their go-to-market is pretty, from what I've seen of it, is pretty sharp.
Nice. I got to check them out. That sounds good.
You got that day where you want a beer, but you're not quite
ready for the alcohol.
You're not quite ready for the booze. You just, you kind of get that post lawn mowing beer, but then you're ready to go the rest of the day. You're not tired.
I like it. I'll have to check it out. Well, last question for you. What's the largest opportunity or threat facing marketers in your mind?
I think it goes back to a couple of questions ago. I think how you prove value within the discipline. So I think there's definitely the measurement size of marketing. There's more and more a premium, and how do you provide value across the business and not just in the marketing function? I think we're growth creators, and so it does transcend just the marketing function, and it's driving growth attitude and growth strategy throughout the organization and being able to prove it. But I think the other side of it is don't lose the art of it while you do it.
Right.
I think it could be easy if the data is essential and it's important, but it's the artful side to match with the science is still critical to differentiate and to resonate with your customer and to tell the story that you need to tell. And so I think just the alchemy of the two is a balance, finding the right balance, but not losing either, I think is super important. And I think it's going to be a continued challenge. I mean, I could say, I think all of us are going to have an interesting year with the macro climate in 2023. And so with that, I think proving return on the investment is going to be even more of a premium because, every company got to be smart, really smart with the investments we have. And everyone's looking for the investment to drive strategy to grow the business. But I think you really got to be able to prove it out.
Yeah.
And so I think, I know that's not new, but I think it's just going to be a continuation that we're going to have to look at.
No, makes sense. Well, Terry, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having. This was a lot of fun. I love that. That was great. It's always good to talk to you, my friend. Always good to talk to you.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me with post-production support from Sam Robertson. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe on marketingtodaypodcast.com. Tell your friends and colleagues about the show. I love hearing from listeners. You can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes and links to what was discussed in the episode today, and you can search our archives. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.